Robert Duncan became the 4th Chancellor of Texas Tech University in 2014. Prior to that, many of you are aware of his very impactful background providing service as a representative or a senator to our state. What's even more, I think, is really neat to mention is that Senator Duncan, Chancellor Duncan, he holds many titles. I'm going to go ahead and start calling him Chancellor Duncan for the rest of this introduction. He is one of us. He received a bachelor's degree in agricultural economics from Texas Tech University, as well as a law degree from Texas Tech University. A little history about the Texas Alliance for Water Conservation is, and I'm sure that he'll share a little more of the background when he approaches the lectern, is that the Texas Alliance for Water Conservation would not be here if it wasn't for Chancellor Duncan's foresight. We're pleased to have him join us once again as your keynote speaker for today's luncheon. Please join me in welcoming Bob Duncan. Thank you, sir.
Well, it's great to be here in front of a lot of friends, and I look forward to. I'm a little rusty on speaking. I've been retired more or less for 5 years, so if I don't know how to work this, I've got somebody down there that does. But hopefully we'll have some fun today too. I can't help but not mention, and I see Ken Isom out there. Ken and I are the same age. We were talking a while ago how we don't feel like we're very old, and we're probably not if we don't feel that way. But I grew up in agriculture back in the 60s and 70s, and you know, we didn't have all these tools that we have today. How many of you have driven an M Farmall with a 4-row cultivator on it? I don't see many hands out there, but I see some. I used to use that as getting in shape for football because no power steering, no power brakes, and turning those things at the end of the row was really pretty hard. And we didn't have a mesonet either. And we used the IF index to know when we had enough soil moisture to plant. I don't know how many of y'all know what the IF index is, but it's you get your index finger and you scratch down, and if there's some moisture down there, then you'll be able to plant. And that was our technology that we had back in those days. So today I'm coming here to talk to you about the original idea and hopefully give you some enthusiasm about going forward and continuing this original idea to be able to provide a great opportunity for producers to chart their own course as it relates to irrigation and agriculture conservation. I don't know if y'all read the papers. I'm sure you do, these papers, but the Ag Water Clips just on January 8th of this year, out of Topeka, Kansas, there was an article that read, these were the lead-off articles. Kansas water experts are sounding an alarm decades in the making. Farmers and ranchers in the state's western half must stop pumping more water out of a vast aquifer than nature puts back each year, or risk the economic collapse of a region important to the U.S. food supply. That warning is setting up a big and messy fight for the annual session of the Kansas legislature set to open on Monday. Sounds familiar. Yesterday in the Wall Street Journal, there's an article entitled, "Water is a Terrible Thing to Waste." This was an editorial in the Wall Street. California's political leaders are obsessed with climate, so why don't they prepare for droughts or deluges? The atmospheric rivers that are sweeping the parts of Golden State should be a cause for relief, but they've instead given way to catastrophic floods and enormous wastewater. One problem is the state's lack of investment in public works, especially storage and flood control. Drought has recurred through California history, punctuated by wet winters like this one. 2 7-year droughts started in the late 20s and the 40s spurred the construction of a massive system of canals, dams, and reservoirs. But few large water projects have been built since the birth of the modern environmental movement in the 1970s. These are two very current things that are happening right now that impact agriculture in our country. And Texas had a great opportunity several years ago to start planning ahead and getting producers involved in making the decisions to move forward. The original idea for Texas Alliance for Water Conservation really came from a couple of things. You'll remember about 20 years ago, it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but 20 years ago, drip irrigation was just starting to be implemented in the South Plains. And one of my staffers and I went to an academic setting where they were testing different methods of using drip irrigation and trying to solve different problems that were occurring with the way roots would migrate toward the water. And we were given a report which was well done, and I think had some really good findings and had a really lot of good work, but it was really hard to read. I had a degree in agriculture and a degree in a law degree, and it was hard for me to understand exactly what the conclusions were. And it also occurred to me at that time, and many of us, that in academia, a lot of these tests that are done on different products that we're going to use in the real world are not done in the real world. They're done in microplots so that all of the different variables that occur in a production agriculture aren't always tested as well, or there's not the ability to test that. So that was the idea from the very beginning. What we wanted to do was come up with something that would provide producers with more structure in the way that they were going about managing groundwater. And if you'll recall back in those days, groundwater management, and there never was a real, government and ag just doesn't always go together, let's put it like that. And producers were very distrustful of anything that the government wanted to do back in those days, and I think still, as it relates to groundwater and management of groundwater. Our groundwater districts, and I always supported the local groundwater districts as opposed to central control of water, because I do think we can do a lot better job of managing our local groundwater needs and concerns at the local level where it really matters, because we know a lot more about what we need than they know in Austin or in Washington, D.C. So the idea to have some sort of a program to involve producers in research, producers in field testing and things like that with some government support was hatched. You've always heard about failure to communicate. I think sometimes I had a little problem communicating this idea from the very beginning. The first meeting that we had was at the Federal Plant Stress and Soil Moisture Lab over here on 4th Street. You recall that lab was made famous by President Clinton in his State of the Union address when he made fun of measuring plant stress. I don't think he understood what we really meant by that. But anyway, that facility's done a great job over the years, and we decided we would have a meeting over there, and we would discuss the original idea of having government fund some sort of a program where producers would be involved in measuring water, using meters, reporting data, and doing things like that so we could get a better idea of the real world application of irrigation management tools. And so we went to that meeting. Let's see if I get this right. Yeah. And that was the response. How many of you were at that meeting? I know that I've seen a few faces that were at that meeting. And so we really thought that, there was a lot of producer distrust. And so what it really demonstrated to me that we needed to double down on the need for an irrigation management strategy that was developed by academia, government, and producers. But I really failed to communicate that. But there was one guy in the room that realized that, and that was Rick Kellison. And he came up to me, and I really felt I needed a little support that day. And anyway, he came up and gave me some encouragement. And a little, as you know, the process continued to go forward. So learning from that meeting and listening to producers that came up afterwards, we decided that we would maybe change the direction about how we communicated what we wanted to do and what this was really going to be. And we took some lessons from the Boll Weevil Foundation. You'll recall back in the day, when I ran for the Senate, actually, there was a lawsuit pending before the Texas Supreme Court challenging the constitutionality of the boll weevil eradication foundation. And most of that was occurring around Plainview. The plaintiffs were mostly from Plainview. I was campaigning in Plainview. I was campaigning in San Angelo, La Mesa. I wouldn't talk about boll weevils when I was campaigning in Plainview, but I might down in San Angelo because they were a little bit more favorable to a boll weevil program. But as you all remember, the Texas Supreme Court found that the boll weevil program was unconstitutional and needed to be revamped. So Steve Verrett, I don't know if Steve's here today, but Steve Verrett came into my office and said, why don't we file a shell bill and see if we can't do something about that. And the way we resolved the boll weevil foundation, the boll weevil problem in Texas, and I think today I can say that other than maybe in the lower Rio Grande Valley, we've eradicated the boll weevil. And the reason that that was done was because we put producers in control. And we gave them some resources to be able to get behind an effective eradication program. Now that doesn't, I'd like to mention Lindy Patton and his crew and people that have done a great job with that, but at the same time, that program is the model for how we would, I think, be successful in being able to provide a program that would be very effective for irrigation management. So Rick Kellerson kind of got involved with this, and we started putting together a group of folks. We had a number of people that were involved in the very first idea about how to put this together. And as you can see, you've got the producers across the South Plains, and I'll mention them a little bit more in a minute. You've got it wasn't the Davis College then. I don't think Gordon Davis knew he was going to have a college at that time, but he did. The Davis College, the College of Ag Sciences, and that's where Rick got involved because Texas Tech got really behind this. The AgriLife Research Centers got behind it. We had the West Texas Mesonet, which was really pretty new at that time, but they were involved in it. We had the USDA, Farm Assistance Planning Solutions, NCRS, and the High Plains Water District. And those are all of the groups that were involved in this coming together, but not to dictate what this was going to be, but to be able to get producers involved so that they could help design a program that would be beneficial for producers. And so the first phase one of this program, if you'll recall, and this has been 20 years ago, we were able to get a little money in the bill. We got about $10 million actually for two of these programs, one down in the valley and one here in the High Plains. And so we identified two counties that had producers that were willing to take the risk to be able to get with us, work with all of these different academic and governmental entities to come up with a way to be able to advance irrigation management and conservation. We had $6.2 million awarded by a grant from the Water Development Board made available through the legislation that we passed. There were 20 producers that were willing to participate in this and provide the guidance and leadership necessary. And we had 4,700 acres in the very first project. And I really thought that was encouraging. But what was most encouraging was the fact that these were the first producers to stick their neck out on this and allow all of these groups, under the leadership of Rick Kellerson, Texas Tech and Texas A&M and others, to be able to come together and develop a program that would benefit producers with a goal of conserving water in the long run, a valuable resource, but preserving profitability of our production agriculture at the same time. And that's the whole goal of this program. The program has been successful, and I think I've heard the Water Development Board in different areas or different ways and different programs really tout this program as one of the leading programs in the country, probably because of the way that it's been operated by producers, and it's been it has been an opportunity for industry and academia and government to work with producers to come up with a way to sustain agriculture, production agriculture in our area of the country. Phase two, now has expanded to different additional counties. Hale, Floyd, Lubbock, Crosby, Lamb, Swisher, Castro, Palmer, and Deaf Smith counties are now involved in this program. 3.6 million additional dollars have been put in it, invested in this program to be able to continue what we're doing on the ground. 30 producers are now involved in this and are contributing to the program. And now there's 6,100 acres in the program. So you can see the success, and you wouldn't be here if you didn't know the success of this program. I think the biggest achievements of this program have been that TAWC has become a facilitator it's become a facilitator of communications between producers, academia, industry, and policymakers. And that's really, that's the key to the success, to be able to bring everyone together to continue to move this program forward with industry and academia. And it's raised awareness of the different things that we're going to have to do for water conservation techniques. Just for an example, there's several irrigation management tools that have been produced and I think are used by many of you out here with regard to agriculture or production agriculture. Many best practice managements, field-based testing of emerging technologies, economic evaluations, outreach and dissemination of results, water management and certification programs, and supplemental grants and private donations. A lot of the presentations in publications are also useful and useful to you, and hopefully we can continue to provide this type of program, the field testing, the real-world involvement of producers in helping to develop governmental policies as well as best management practices is critical to the survival of production agriculture in West Texas. So I hope in the future, this is a program is like many other programs. You've seen the success. I think policymakers have seen the success of this program, and it's going to be, I think many of us, hopefully our goal is to continue this opportunity for production agriculture to work with industry and academia and government to be able to provide better irrigation education and management policies that benefit producers, with the goal of allowing producers to manage this scarce resource of water but preserve the profitability of production agriculture. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have concerning where we were, where we've been, and the benefits of this program, or take any comments. Hopefully not ones like we had back there at the earlier days. Well, oh, yes, ma'am. Well, I didn't do that, so that would have been the Water Development Board and Rick Kellerson's group whenever they first started this. There were several of you. If you were on that first group, raise your hand, because there's several of you out there that I've seen that had the courage to sit out to be able to work with Rick. And I think that's basically, it was kind of a anecdotal thing of just what can we put together and who would volunteer to do this, because not many producers would volunteer to open their books and open their data and take the time necessary to be able to develop a meaningful program. But I think I'll give credit to Rick Kellerson and the folks at Tech that were working on this from the very beginning, that developed those criteria, presented them to the Water Development Board, which approved the program and awarded the funds. But it had to be producers that wanted to do it. That was the key thing. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed being here and seeing a lot of good old friends, and young friends too.
Thank you, Chancellor Duncan. We appreciate your message today, and I think that all of us in here can agree that you've had a significant impact not only with this project, but throughout the state of Texas with all of your work, as well as, to me, it's more important, Texas Tech University is in a better place because of your leadership. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, we're going to take a 15-minute break, so please feel free to visit and once again go out into the area where the booths are set up.